So how to start the repetition is very, very, very important because it can affect the entire rest of the work during the repeating processes and during the repetition exercise, which, by the way, used to be called the word game and later was renamed repetition. And the way that you end up starting this the repetition really does influence it. Now, it's very similar to how emotional preparation will influence the work in an acting exercise, in and out. An in and out was an acting exercise that was done back in New York City, and it was renamed the Doors and Activities for Meisner exercises. And see, when we start the work, how we start the work is going to affect all the different textures of the work. And if we start the work in a way that's actually going to be able to more enrich it later on as it develops, then we can really start to influence ourselves and how we actually have relationships within creativity, which is ideal. And if we study these things, like how to start the repetition, just like how to start our acting exercises, we have a micro example and a smaller exercise, which can still be fantastic, that can really start to practice those acting in the acting ingenuity of the actor, that can actually be able to practice what it is that we need to do when we get into acting. So everything's connected. And as we start to understand the differences, now there's a main thing. If you start out an exercise with glibness, you're likely going to continue with glibness. Now, not always, because here's the thing. When we're working with acting dynamics, with repetition, there's two people or more doing the repetition. So this repetition, it's moment to moment, which is the very, very popular phrase that Sanford Meisner and others have popularized in acting. It's moment to moment. So we have one person that says something and the other person repeats it. And that's the repetition. And then the other person receives everything. The way to do this, the best way to do this is one of the ways to do this is to really receive the other person. Completely take them in. You listen to them, you hear them, you really digest what they're saying, you pay attention to them, you keep every single thing about yourself open to the other person. And then you repeat. You go through an internal process and then you repeat. Now, that's key. But what will happen when that happens is all kinds of things could happen. Because you have a moment to moment exercise, which is the repetition. But how you start the repetition could affect the moment to moment. So you want to be able to understand how you start something is sometimes how you'll be able to put gumption into it, or you'll be able to have something to be able to put some meat into the process. So you could start the repetition exercise just like you could start acting with a glib response, just with very glibly, and that will likely get glib results. It might work to be able, maybe something will get caught in another person and they'll be upset that you're glib, and then all of a sudden there'll be a life that will come from that. And that does happen. But if you start out glibly, you might end up glibly. Now, if you get there's main ways that you can do this. And you can choose how you want to be able to work. Now, it doesn't mean that what you put in is what you're going to get out, but it's likely going to affect it. And it's the same thing with emotional preparation. You have your emotional preparation and you have acting work, and then however you start your emotional preparation usually carries through. So, how we start the repetition exercise. Some people choose to start this with an idea. You could use that as a personal idea, which would be better because it's personal, it's from you. You could choose an idea that's external, which may not be as ideal because it's external. You could start this with a reason, which again, if you work with intellect, you're working with glibness, you're working with something that's external, you're gonna get further away from really getting into the meat and potatoes of the repetition. So you want to be able to get in, start off with something of some sort of substance. It doesn't have to be really intense. It could just be very present, or it could be very alert, or it could be very deep. So when you choose to work with this, you're going to start to be able to understand, just by doing a few of these exercises, if you start with an idea, you're going to get the certain types of responses that are going to be more likely for you to come back to you. Now, the second way you can do this is you can work with a feeling. Now, if you just think to yourself a feeling, and there's a lot of aspects to emotional preparation, but we're not talking about an emotional preparation, we're talking about a feeling. Feelings are often this fleeting components to work for actors. A lot of times actors think that they're working with feelings, or think that they're working with emotions, but they're actually working with feelings. So, to be certain that you're working with a feeling, you want to resonate with the feeling, or you want to be able to pick a really good, strong feeling that you have. One that you have maybe some consistency with in life. And then that might be able to work with your repetition. So you could start the repetition off with a feeling that you have about the person. So you've gone beyond, or at least into the personal realm of feeling something personal, having a personal idea or a thought about a person, and then you've worked into being able to work with a feeling, something that you feel about the other person. And if you can take that and make it a personal feeling, that's even stronger. So you have the options to be able to do that. Now, if you take a feeling and you sit on that feeling long enough, and the feeling's active in you, sometimes, a lot of times, feelings come and go. Feelings are like a river. They'll come in, they'll go. A lot of times, it's very easy to think that you're working with a feeling, and then all of a sudden the feeling's gone. And thoughts happen even quicker. They resonate for a moment and then they take off. So you've got to catch your thought. So a lot of the times with these repetition works, you'll have an amazing thought about a person or some kind of thought, but then it will just vanish. Because as soon as the reality of the repetition starts, whatever's in the reality of the repetition takes over, which is part of the work of the exercise, what you want to have happen. And you want to be able to work in the moment. But when you're working to be able to choose how to start the repetition, and now through this discussion, we're able to understand that you can go out and try these different areas. So you've got your emotion, you've got your idea, and you've got your feeling. And if you sit on your feeling long enough, you end up with an emotion. And this is an emotion's now something that's even deeper. So now the thing to know about an emotion, emotions sometimes are very, 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 very still. I always say that emotions are like a big placid lake or pond. The rivers and the streams go into the ponds of the lakes. And the lakes and the ponds are emotion. The rivers and the streams are feeling. Sometimes they have, and the idea is the spring. So you've got your springs coming up with the water, the idea is in the spring, and then you've got your rivers, they flow into the emotion. And emotions can be extremely meaningful. They can be very, very, very personal. But they're not very active unless they're interactive. So you can start the repetition with, or the word game with emotion. Now, this gets to a pretty interesting discussion because we want to take emotional preparation. We all want to work at the very highest levels. And sometimes this is the thing that's so tricky about it. Sometimes working at a very simple level of just working with the simple feeling, we can fall in, even if we're an advanced actor, into a deep emotion that we would never have found unless we were working with the feelings. And sometimes there's these deep, deep emotions that we wouldn't be able to access the expression of if we didn't have the expression of the feeling. So we end up finding these expressions and we start finding these feelings because these vast amounts of emotion that we are tapping into. So you can start the emotional repetition, right, with an emotion. But you have to be able and you have to be willing to always let go of your emotion. You must. And you have to be willing and you have to be able to be present and to have moment to moment exchanges, interplay. So the last way that you can do this, that's another example of a way that you can do this, is you can do a full emotional preparation. Now, there are over 9, 12 different ways to do emotional preparation. There is a plethora of very personal preparation techniques, emotional preparation techniques. You could go into any one of those dozen, and you can go into yourself, connect a plethora of meaning, of motivation, of feeling, of emotion, and you have your emotional preparation set up within you, and then you go and you can start the repetition. Now, what does this do for you? I always say, there's this old saying, what you love, don't hold on to. If it loves you, it will love you back. Very old saying. When you do your emotional preparation, or when you have when you're at the very, very beginning stages, it might be just a very, very personal feeling or a very personal thing. You haven't really learned how to work with the emotion yet. But later on, it will turn into this emotional preparation and you'll be able to have this massive emotion that you'll be able to work with. And you'll be able to learn this thing called acting craft. And you'll be able to determine for yourself what you can actually consistently build in that. Now, as personal as that work is, you must be able to take that into your repetition exercises and then go moment to moment. So you go into a situation where you're willing to let that go. So you have a situation and you're willing to let that go. And then you're seeing what the other person has to be able to respond to that. And they may not get the entire emotion in their life right away. And then it goes back, and then you get to reply to their reply. You don't keep replying, and you don't keep working off of your emotional preparation. You let go of your emotional preparation and you do the repetition. And you work only off the moment of the other person. Now, if you do it this way, you're practicing letting go. If it loves you, it'll love you back. So, trust it. And this is how you build up actors' faith, actors' trust in yourself. Now, you might be working with a partner that you don't think is very sensible or very sensitive. That's okay. This is a technique to practice. That you can practice the ability of doing your emotional preparation and then going and doing repetition. And you do the repetition, and you're in a situation where you've got the repetition, and that's the first moment. Then the second moment is you taking in the person and how they've actually replied to you. And then you've got your moment, and then you express what it is that you've actually got from the other person. So you've left your emotional preparation behind you, but at the same time, it's with you. And this is the concept. The concept is that what you put in, you come out, and it will work out in a natural way. You can do that with an idea, but the idea is likely not going to stay in you. You can do that with a feeling. The feeling might stay, it might go because it's a feeling. You can do that with an emotion if you isolate an emotion, but you are more likely to do that with emotional preparation. And that's exactly what you'll end up practicing if you do this with the repetition practice. It's very similar to the moments that will happen when you go in to do repetition with the doors and activities, which they're calling now the doors and activities. They used to call them the ins and the outs. So you take the ins and the outs exercise, which are now the doors and activities, and you go ahead and you start to learn how to do your preparation and then trust those moments. So you're not bringing your baggage of emotional preparation in. You're bringing it to the door, but it stays at the door, and then you work off of those moments. You're doing the exact same thing in repetition. So, how you start the repetition is very important. And yes, it's very spontaneous. It's very fun. There's all kinds of things that can happen. And to be quite honest, you can bring the most serious piece of work to acting. And if you're working moment to moment, you might end up in a hysteric, a laughter, even with the most serious situation. It's a sad topic, but it's kind of interesting. It's, some people, they laugh at funerals because they're nervous. There's emotion, but they laugh. It's not that they think it's funny. They just have nervous laughter. It can happen in life, and it should happen in art, because you bring in your emotional awareness, whatever it ends up being. If you're bringing in a feeling to your repetition, you bring in a feeling. You bring in and you expect to let it go. If it loves you, it will love you back. If it doesn't love you, then don't worry about it. It's something not to worry about. Let it go. And then work off of what the other person has said, done. And the most interesting thing is with that attitude, what you will notice is you will notice sometimes that you'll be working with the repetition. And maybe there's something that the other person didn't notice about you when you started the repetition in a certain way. And then it might be 5 minutes later, it might be 2 minutes later, it might be 5 repeats or 10 repeats down the way. And all of a sudden, they're starting to pick up on your emotional preparation and you didn't know, or they're starting to pick up on the feeling that you initiated the start of the work with. Well, those are all genuine. Those are genuine responses that have actually happened. So you've got your genuine responses. You've got your ability to be able to now let go of what you brought in as a personal start. Now this is key. So try this out, work with this, understand that this is how to start the repetition, many different ways on how to start the repetition. And how to start the repetition is your personal choice to do as a student, to be able to explore how to do acting and also including your motivations on why you want to do acting. So one last note maybe. If you find that there's a lot of screaming that's going on in the repetition work, you might want to revisit how to receive the other person. Because although there's genuine anger that does happen in life, a lot of times it's very exaggerated sometimes when these repetition things happen. And sometimes that happens with many different emotions, not just anger, but a lot of times people feel like there's an obligation with this whole Meisner repetition that they have to be angry with each other in order for the work to be real. But the problem is it's just not the truth. Sanford Meisner moved from New York City to Los Angeles. And I know there's a plethora of interpretations as to why and everything else. But he said himself, and other students have said themselves, that the work changed as the developments changed. And you'll notice that at first you might go into acting very angry about life, and you might then find a place where you have some personal expression, or you might be only one or two ways in life first. And then as you find your personal expression in acting, all of a sudden you become this, you turn and you start to soften. And the softening isn't you losing your acting, it's you finding your acting. So when you're capable of finding your acting, and you're capable of being able to find all those different colors of life and expression and of emotion and of feeling, and then all of a sudden you start getting more ideas because you're more alert and you're more awake to the creative side of yourself. Those are the kinds of concepts that you want to start to continue to divulge and input yourself into. And that will be of a great assistance to you in your acting. So don't feel like you have to have every single thing having to be of anger. Although it's fine to express anger, anger is definitely a part of life. And it should be a safe place to do so.